Good afternoon. Welcome back to another episode of Speaking Legally, where the legal meets the cultural. Each and every week with our two legal experts, Joyce Russell Esquire, Edward Pichado Esquire, and my name is Dr. Stacey S.C. Grant. And we thank you for not only tuning in, participating in the dialogue, sharing the broadcast with your friends. You never know where you might find Speaking Legally next. So thank you for being a part of our community. And before we jump into another packed show with a lot to cover, we're going to hear a brief welcome from our co-host, Senor Russell.
Hey, welcome back, everyone. Glad you could join us for another episode of Speaking Legally, where the culture and the legal meet. This is another episode where we will ensure that the culture and legal meets, because that's what we do. We make sure we fulfill our mission statements at the end of the day and provide some education that you could take from here on throughout. And you could tell two friends, and they could tell two friends, and so on and so on and so on, to make sure our community is well depth and well endowed in the legal leads of the world. So welcome.
Thank you. Muchas gracias and buenas tardes.
Buenas tardes, hablando legalmente, mi gente. Good afternoon, speaking legally. Thank you for viewing us today. I'm sure you're going to find the information to be quite fulfilling, educational, as well as spiritually uplifting. So we look forward to conveying this information to you in a strong spirit and hope you receive it the same. Hello.
All right. So now let's get into a couple of headlines. We, usually take a moment to acknowledge when someone has transitioned, and we have someone who is an NBA Hall of Famer from the Detroit Pistons and Milwaukee Bucks, who have transitioned after almost 70. So we want to salute Bob Lanier and all his family and fans with what he contributed to the sport.
I'm so glad you moved the screen up, because I didn't want you to think that was Bob.
Bob Lanier.
I was going to say that's a Lanier, but that ain't Bob Lanier. So we appreciate you scrolling up. Those out there know that I play ball, and basketball is my favorite sport. Although I love some football season, basketball is my favorite sport, and I have affinity to Bob Lanier because back in the day, I was a Milwaukee Bucks fan. It was Bob Lanier. It was Marcus Johnson. It was Junior Bridgman. It was Brian Winters. It was Sidney Moncrief. It was Paul Pierce. It was Kareem. The whole crew. I had them all down pat. And, so I followed his career. They called him the Gentle Giant because he was a big guy, but he was a very soft-spoken individual. Never got a chance to meet him, but I followed his work onto the NBA headquarters and league office, where he was one of the pioneers to ensure that retired NBA players have a voice in the league, and making sure that they get their just due, whether it is their retirement checks, whether it is the annual retirement dinner that takes place at the All-Star game, which I've attended, the retirement dinner. It's a wonderful place to meet some of the likes like Bill Russell and all those, Oscar Robertson. And when you get a chance to shake those hands and have a little bit of a conversation with them and realize what it was like to be a basketball player back then, even though people thought you were rich, you're nowhere near being rich, and watching those individuals elevate their career and make it in other areas, such as becoming, the mayor in Detroit and owning steel companies and just blossoming in the business world, you come to realize that the new NBA players, you have a long way to go to step in those shoes and be a part of the mainstream in a way that those individuals were, such as Bob Lanier. So rest in power, brother.
Yeah, I used to live in Milwaukee, and I know that Bob Lanier, I believe he raised his family there. In fact, I believe he has a son who's a lawyer, and very active in that community. Definitely a legend. Bob Lanier was the man, definitely. So, definitely, sir, may you rest in peace and power. Definitely a legend amongst the Bucks, and and before that, I believe he was with the Detroit Pistons for a few seasons. They're the ones who actually I believe, recruited him into the NBA.
Yeah,
from State Bonnie.
And
actually, Bob is a Buffalo. He was born in Buffalo. He comes from Buffalo, I believe. That's why he ended up going to St. Bonaventure.
Oh, I didn't know he was a New Yorker. So there we go.
Okay.
Paving the way. I know he's an 8-time All-Star, and you don't become an All-Star just because you're a role player. And I also know, for the few times that I've watched him do this, you definitely didn't want to get in a fight with him. You definitely did not want to do that. And I remember one time, if my memory serves me correctly, he was about to get into fisticuffs with somebody, and the NBA player, ran up in the stands, like just broke out, went not in the locker room, not whatever, went up in the stands.
He didn't want none of that.
He didn't want that fire.
No, he didn't want those paws. Those paws are big paws.
Well, we definitely send our condolences to his family and fans. And good afternoon, Maria. Thank you for tuning in. And now we're going to go to another story, unfortunate one. It's a disbarred Bronx lawyer charged in the roommate, rather, of this disbarred Bronx lawyer was charged in his shooting death. This is an unfortunate way to reach your end.
Yeah, I mean, this is a really, really unfortunate story that I came upon. I mean, here's a promising, African-American lawyer. I believe he went to CUNY, Queens. He started his career focusing on providing pro bono services to the needy. Things happened. He got caught up, ended up, getting into some problems. I believe there was an incident in a courtroom in Manhattan and, just a slow descent. And then, apparently he was living in an apartment in the Bronx with these other individuals and ended up getting shot. So this is just, this is really tragic. May he rest in peace, and my condolences and sympathies to the family.
Yeah, I would say the same. I know of him, and I know someone that was trying to work with him, who's an attorney, trying to see him through his obstacles that he was facing at the time that he was a barred and licensed attorney in New York. And only thing I can do is say that this is someone that's from the community and that we can reach and touch him, unlike Bob Lanier, although some people may say they met him. Like, this is a person that we saw in real time. And may his family be able to deal with the consequences of death and what it brings to your doorstep.
Absolutely. It's always hard to hear about any sort of transition, but something like this is definitely tragic. And as we are talking about unfortunate situations, somebody unfortunately messed with Mike Tyson on a plane. What in the world happened here?
Well, I think the guy asked for his cornbread, huh, Ed? You want that cornbread? For those who don't know the movie Life, that's a very significant part where an individual is just asking for a little bit too much of another individual, let's just say. And leave me alone was not the words that person wanted to hear, which I'm sure Mike said at some point during this altercation, like, bro, just leave me alone. Let me just enjoy my flight, because they were on an airplane and they were flying either to or from Florida, something of that nature. And this individual, who, from my understanding, reading reports, was intoxicated and would not leave Mike alone. They were coming from San Francisco, would not leave Mike alone. And anybody know Mike, even from a distance, his attention span and tolerance is not that high. And Mike, as they say, put the paws on him. Kevin Hart said, he put the paws on him. And, look, this wouldn't be news to anybody that's live in America. It's been all over TMZ and all over the news how, someone had to say, without touching Mike, enough already. See, and you could tell Mike has his senses about him because he stopped, and people had their senses about him because nobody grabbed him to stop him, because that could have been incident.
A whole nother situation.
Right. I'm not going to say victim, because clearly the DA's office did not see this person as a victim, right? Just say incident. And Ed, before you chime in, what I thought was important about this case is that the district attorney looked at what happened in totality, right, before making a decision as to whether or not to bring criminal charges. And what they looked at the conduct of the victim that led to the incident, and that weighed in as to what they were going to do, right? And so clearly, quote unquote, the victim was agitating Mike, was doing something to Mike that I wouldn't say warrant, but led to this tragic situation. And I wonder if that was the same thinking that the police had when Will Smith slapped Chris Rock, right? Looking at, well, what led to the incident? Was it this taunting that led to the incident? You know, is there a period where we give some grace, or was it purely just Chris Rock's decision? But it's an interesting way of deciding whether or not to move forward with criminal charges.
Well, my understanding is that the quote unquote victim in this case also agreed that no charges should be levied against Mike Tyson for this incident.
Yeah, I didn't put a lot of weight in that because
well, if I may, I think even that may have been triggered by some of the legal problems that individual has. Because I think something had come up previously in the press about him even being authorized to travel. He may have been under some sort of court supervision, and you know, I'm not disagreeing with you. I believe that the prosecutorial discretion that was utilized in this case was one that relied upon kind of like a total review of all of the circumstances, whether Mike had been provoked, whether, you know, this was triggered by this individual. And I would imagine him stopping at some point probably also played a role. And my understanding is he actually left the plane because he was like, really like, oh my gosh, let me just get out of here, leave this plane, calm down.
Well, that was a little bit of Brooklyn instinct. Like, you know, they coming for me. Let me get away. Let's call it what it is.
Well, I think it's unfair to always look at that action as being something that's I don't know, associated with evading. I think sometimes it's helpful for individuals to say, you know what, let me get out of here. Not like leaving the scene of an accident or something, but I'm leaving the scene of this confrontation. I'm leaving. I'm not going to stick around. I'm not, you know, let this thing diffuse, and I'll, you know, and he went in, you know, it wasn't like he hid from this. He was, my understanding is as soon as he was contacted about this, he was more than happy to sit down and talk about it and do whatever needed to be done to resolve it. I think that
I agree with you from a standpoint of not looking at it from evading, right? But on this show and what I know about life and growing up in certain places, if you want to kind of brush it over and then like, oh yeah, he was strategic and he was just kind of like in it, that's fine. You can have that. All I'm saying is that when we look at percentage points, I don't think that's a large percentage. Now, I think a good portion of the percentage is I'm more mature, I'm an older male. It'd probably be better that I get off this plane. So this way, whatever's coming to me, because Mike is not like Chris Rock. Like you see somebody approaching me, he knows what's going down, right? And so he's not that. And I bring it up because we're talking cultural instincts, right? So he's not going to sit on the plane and wait for them to come on the plane and have that confrontation. He's strategic. He has his wherewithal. He's not evading. He's getting off the plane. Whatever's going to come, let me have it under a different environment, a different atmosphere. Let me tell my side of the story. Let me deal with it under different circumstances than rather be the person that we talk about on this show where he's still sitting there thinking that the plane is going to take off. And we're like, yo, Mike, you really think the plane is going to take off? Like, you know, the marshals are coming, right? You're still a black man in America. You do have celebrity status. So therefore, you're given a little discretion, a little cushion, because if that was you, Ed, beating this dude down, right? You know, that despite the fact that he had flight restrictions or whatever the situation was.
No, listen, you're absolutely right. I mean, you know, I think he handled it well in a mature manner. I'm actually happy because one of my fears here was that they were going to use the fact that, you know, Mike Tyson obviously has a previous criminal record against him in this instance, and I'm glad that they decided not to move forward with these charges under these circumstances. I just hope that other law enforcement observe this incident and use the same level of discretion when looking at incidents like this. Because as you may have alluded to a little earlier, a lot of times, common folk don't get the benefits of this. Some law enforcement go just strictly by oh no, you hit him, so we're going to file charges against you, and that's the end of that, and let the court
story
out. Yeah, instead of just saying, you know what, this is not the one. This is not the one to move forward on.
Right, and we don't have to look any further than looking out the window. Right, you see two people coming in, they having a confrontation. Police can come. Look, we talked about the case in New Jersey, Zaire, I believe his name, right? Where the police came, two kids are having a fight. You're going to handcuff the one? Like, discretion, humanity.
Yeah. Right? Well, Maria just shared that flying is scary and people are out of control and that there's no real security and you're on your own. And that guy was harassing Mr. Mike Tyson. But to your point, both of your points, we're glad that it didn't turn out to another unfortunate story. So on to some more, is this privilege or not, that the judge conditionally lifts Trump's civil contempt order and ends the $10,000 per day fine?
Well, apparently what's happening here is, Trump's attorney had been asking the court for quite some time to not find her client in contempt because, according to her, he genuinely tried to obtain these documents and that they had handed over, everything that they had. Is that true? I doubt it. But apparently, after some sort of private conference with the parties, the judge conditionally lifted the civil contempt order. I believe that it's at $110,000 right now because it was $10,000 per day. So we're talking about 11 days here, if my math is correct. And he's going to have Trump file an affidavit as to his efforts to obtain these documents. And then there'll be a review of that affidavit and a review, I guess, of those efforts. And if, I guess, the judge finds that indeed, the defendants have been responsive here, then he'll, I guess, permanently, halt or rescind this, this contempt order. But, it is conditional. It's conditional upon, this affidavit and explaining further what efforts were made or have been made to obtain these various documents. So this will be interesting to see. Listen, we talked at the last show about, contempt doesn't have to just be monetary. It could also be something even more coercive as putting somebody in custody, which in many cases happens.
For poor people.
It happens with poor people, right? So we're going to see if what happens after this. We're going to closely monitor this. And hey, listen, who knows? The judge may say, you know what? I conditionally lifted the civil contempt order to give you a chance. And now you're like mocking this court. You know what we're going to do? We're going to lock you up. Who knows? We'll see.
Well, look. My crystal ball says, and I've been looking at this crystal ball for a while.
Here we go.
Matter of fact, she's changing her name from Crystal to something else because I know I rubbed it too many times. You know what I mean? And he's not going to jail, right? We can take bets. We can put money on it. He's not. They got FanDuel. We can put the money out. It's legal. That's not happening. I don't know what the affidavit is going to say versus what has already been said orally in court, because they had oral arguments on this before she levied the fine, right? So I don't know what more on paper is going to be said that wasn't said verbally before the fine is issued. Am I cynical? Do I think this is cocktail talk and now we resolve things, or maybe we didn't resolve it? $110,000 for a guy like him is a pimple and an elephant's behind, right? So, will he go to jail? No, we know jail is saved for reporters and those who are socially economically disadvantaged, right? So I'm not saying this is the end of the story, but it's the end of the story. You know what I'm saying?
Well, that 110,000, let's see how that gets paid as well. So to be continued, but at least we have a little bit of good news that we can talk about before
Yes,
moving
indeed.
on with our stories for today. That Brittney Griner's wife, Sherelle, graduates law school with Juris Doctorate degree.
And cum laude is my understanding as well,
right.
which is not easy. That means that sister worked hard while she was in law school and was successfully able to graduate with honors from, of all places, North Carolina Central University School of Law, which is one of the few HBCU law schools in the country. You know,
great campus, what a great place to be.
Yeah, much props. I got accepted into that school years ago when I was applying for law school. You know, I didn't go because I got accepted into Marquette and I chose to go there. But you know, this is a wonderful story. The other wonderful part of this story also is that on this show, we want to definitely keep the name Brittney Griner in people's minds and their hearts as her incarceration in a Russian jail continues. It's good to know that the other day, I believe the State Department upgraded her status to an unjustified detention, you know, which I guess raises the amount of activity they're going to engage in terms of trying to get her released. So, you know, this is good news. And, you know, hopefully it also works to her, you know, to Sherelle's wife's benefit, Brittney, in terms of hopefully motivating or hopefully resulting in her release by keeping her name in the news.
Here's the motivation. Have white people with power and money get involved. You say, well, damn, Royce, that's kind of harsh. No, that's reality, right? We know that on every scope of the world. When you get white folks with money involved, whether it's race relations, economics, making a difference in someone's life trajectory, getting money, endowments, you name it, getting people on the other side of the aisle to buy into your narrative, what you're trying to put forth, then things start to happen. I'm not saying it because I just made it up. We know it's true. How do we do that? Here's a suggestion. As the NBA players stopped a playoff game when the brother was shot in Milwaukee and they were having the playoffs in the bubble, Giannis and the crew decided, hey, look, we're not playing this playoff game. This is something that happened in our backyard. Somebody was shot wrongfully. We've been dealing with this. We're not doing it. For every NBA player, because we're talking about the NBA, for every NBA player and fan that goes to watch the WNBA and the NBA Players Association, a little think tank right here. Maybe we stop a game. Maybe we don't do a playoff game. And then those with money and those with power start to pay attention, because we're talking billionaires and millionaires that own these teams, right? Look, this is happening to someone that's in the family. Look, I love that it happened when Johnny Smith or Ray or Pookie gets shot on the corner. I love that. I mean, I don't want you to stop that at all. But this is a sister of the cloth, right? She got a BA behind her name, right? W, she has an NBA behind her name, right? Just put a W for women, right? This is one of your peoples, right? This is your people's. Somebody, something. Let's just don't have the Pledge of Allegiance. Let's just don't have business as usual. Are the WNBA players? You know what? We're not going to play 4 or 5 games. Every other game, we're not going to play. Now, I know you don't get paid a lot. I understand that. And you have to work and play, you know, play overseas or play for a national team or a school teacher during the winter months, and then an NBA player, WNBA player in the summer months. But check it out. If you ain't got skin in the game, nobody else is going to have skin in the game.
Well, I know that recently with the start of the WNBA season, they, I believe they put her number, her name on a decal on the court of.
I know that's factual, but I ain't going to take that as anything other than just what it is, because her name and her number could be on every GD jersey.
No, I'm saying on the floor of every
And it can
court
be on
where
every
they
half
play.
court. Look, if you got Black Lives Matter on the floor of a basketball court, and that's what you have, you don't have anything.
Well, listen. I mean, I understand that you would like, I guess, some them not to play a boycott, if you will, of a game in terms of the athletes playing. I understand that. I don't disagree with you in terms of that move. I'm just highlighting what they have chosen to do. The WNBA players have chosen to do. I mean, I haven't thought as much about whether or not, in light of the fact that one of the main reasons this happened in the first place was that you have these WNBA players pressured to go out and play in these foreign countries because they're not getting paid enough at home.
There should be some responsibility to that, right?
That's a big issue that needs to be tackled. And maybe they decided that maybe not playing may not be the best move in light of all that and where they're trying to get to there in terms of trying to get, the owners or the NBA to, figure out a way of doing some parity there. But for now, I just hope that this gets released.
I understand that you are reporting facts. You're not reporting your opinion. But what I'm suggesting, as we do on this show, right? We suggest things, we look at things, we critically think about things, and we trying to push it. Somebody got to push it to the next level, because I've watched First Take, ESPN, I've watched Steve Smith, I've watched Shannon Sharp. Nobody's saying much or nothing about what's the next step on this situation. Maybe it's not every game. Maybe it's one game, something that nationally somebody could recognize
and aware that she's still there, because when things
like that,
things are not top of news stories, folks seem to forget, and that's
who determines how it gets to the top of the news story. If you don't have action, it doesn't get there.
Yeah, it has to be.
I just hope that this news story in of itself continues the awareness of her situation.
Yeah, because it's a lot on her. It's a lot on her family, and it should be a lot on the country, knowing that we have a citizen that is, being detained. So as we talk about our country and our rights as citizens, we see that we are literally in the midst of, earlier today, what was happening with the Senate vote on the federal abortion rights bill. So we talked, when all of this was originally leaking and starting out, about some of the other implications that come out of this whole discussion and the concerns that are being voiced, and the advocacy, the rallies, the protests. So what say both of you how we see things moving regarding this abortion rights bill?
I would just say keep your headlights on other things that can come from this, whether there's some regulation as to contraceptives, whether there's regulation as to same-sex marriages, interracial marriages. Just keep your eye on the ball. I'm sure Ed has a more in-depth political analysis to it, but just on a like who's watching who, keep your eyes open.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with my colleague. I mean, just to start off, I'm just not optimistic that, this bill is going to pass the Senate, given the fact, given the polarization between the parties, given the fact that, the conservatives in the Republican Party are really looking at this impending Supreme Court decision as a victory. They're not gonna, they're just not gonna allow the Democrats to, take that momentum away from them. So I'm not very optimistic. I agree with Royce that this decision, if it comes down, because let's just continue to keep in mind that this was a draft that was released, but if indeed that draft becomes the final version of this bill, of this decision overturning Roe v. Wade, I think it's going to be what President Biden has stated, that there's a fear here, a well-founded fear, that this is going to lead to the overturn of other rights that have been established by Supreme Court precedent. I mean, one of the ones that I can think of, which Royce just mentioned earlier. I mean, listen, you got many of the decisions that fall within the line of this decision, like Roe v. Wade, are based on equal protection and the due process clause of the 14th Amendment of the Constitution. And so when you talk about overturning Roe v. Wade, you're also looking at the overturn of a number of other decisions that are part of that same line, from same-sex marriage on down to interracial marriage. And it's interesting because here you have Clarence Thomas voting for this bill, and he himself is in an interracial marriage. And
well, the question becomes, we'll do enough damage and we'll stop it when it hurts me.
Yeah, I mean, it's extremely
right?
It's extremely convenient. The Supreme Court decision that legalized interracial marriage was Loving v. Virginia, and it's funny because I think that Clarence Thomas lives in Virginia. There was a time when states, because we keep talking about this states' rights thing, like, oh, leave it up to the states. Well, what if the state of Virginia says, oh, states' rights? Well, you know what? We're going to go back to the original framers, those who originally
your forefathers,
the forefathers who didn't want their white daughters marrying black men. How about that, right? How about that? How about them apples?
Wait. Not only black men. Let's get to the reality, as you said.
Any man of color, right?
Dominican, you name it. We're gonna go through the whole
we different. We different.
Oh, you different. I see. That's right. You different. You sexy. I knew that was gonna come out. I knew that was gonna come out.
Here we go.
That's why I threw that. I threw as Kenny Smith and TNT. I threw the bait out because we going fishing. I knew we gonna pull something up in here. But you understand what we saying here, right?
I'm just kidding.
So here it is. Now folks are gonna be, just doing what they want to do. Just do what you want to do. You know what I mean? As they say.
This is very unnerving that in 2022, we are revisiting so much of what has been the law of the land for years in a way that's not favorable to those who haven't had voice and haven't had recourse for certain situations like a woman's body. This is wow. I continue to be amazed when I open up a headline or read what is happening. But let's see. I don't know if the vote came out yet because I've been in meetings all day, but that was earlier today where this was being discussed. So
to be honest with you, I think this vote is really to put legislators on the spot. So the women of America can see who is in their corner and who is not. Because remember when these justices who signed on to this Alito decision were being vetted by the Senate, invariably, I believe Coney Barrett to Kavanaugh were like, "Oh no, Roe v. Wade is the law of the land."
That's right. Let's rock and roll.
And then all of a sudden they find themselves in a position where they're very comfortable with overturning it.
And this is what we call it for everybody out there in the legal field. This is what we call, I'm filing this motion to smoke people out. The motion has legs. You're filing it for good reason, but you're filing it not because you kind of know the answer, but you want to see the answer. So this bill is about, look, we know who in this room is cutting spades, right? We know, who ain't got no clubs. We kind of know, right? We know in this room, like Stacy, she cutting clubs. My man Ed, he got no diamonds. We kind of know, right? Nobody's saying anything. Everybody's kind of putting their books on the table. This is a cultural show. We play spades here. This is what we talk about with the program. And it takes somebody to smoke somebody out. Boom, they throw a card. And then now we see, all right, Ed is light on the hearts. Stacy's light on the clubs. This is what this is about. This is about smoking them
One
out.
thing we know for sure, we don't want to play cards with this man.
Okay, like I'm
To see
saying.
who's who. To see who's who. I mean, this is what it's about. So now you smoke out and you find out that Schumer's for this and so-and-so's for that. Here we go. Because, as you know, in Speaking Legally, we cover the whole genre. And I don't know who's fronting on here, but we cover the whole genre. Everybody get a piece of this education.
But we're going to be back on to see when everybody does get smoked out to your utilizing spades as a way for us to understand what's going down. But this really will be interesting to see who is publicly going to stand with what it is that they are doing to turn back the hands of time. Yeah, Richard, that's your brother playing cards on the park bench. Yeah, thanks for tuning in. All right, so now,
hey, look, we don't, Dr. Grant, we don't even want to talk about the life lessons we learned from that, because everybody sitting on this chair, you can start it from a pair of spades.
Don't
right?
well, you know,
you can start it from there, work your way around.
I'm a trash talking spades player. I'll admit
In Ed's case, we could say dominoes, but you know, spades.
Dominoes.
Oh, dominoes for those of us who have a little West Indian in us. You don't know how to play dominoes.
Same old, same old. You know, playing the doubles. Come on, this is where we at. This is where we at here.
Well, good for a little levity in the show as we're a little over our halfway mark, and we have some heavy topics to discuss, because as much as we identify when there's abuse of those in power, we also have to recognize when they put themselves in harm's way each and every day, sometimes working and sometimes off duty. This is an unbelievable story. I'm like, ugh. I just don't like to hear anyone lose their life for any reason. But this is an NYPD cop tailed his suspicious wife to an upstate hotel before killing her dog walker lover and himself. Did they have to title it the dog walker lover? Oh my goodness. This is just so
and you know what? And this is on the heels of, and I don't know if we have this, but this is on the heels of one police officer killing another police officer at Buffalo Wild Wings. Right, one officer was 30, the other one was 26, because he followed his wife, who was also having an affair, and he killed them in the parking lot. And I bring it up because, you know, I always promote cardiac arrest, a tactical guide on how to handle unlawful police stops. And one of the things that we mention in this book, and one of the things we know in real life, and I say police are people too. End of story. You start there, you end there. And once you start with that analysis, then you're able to accept or reject some of the things that come your way. And so this story and the other story is highlighting how they are people too, and how they're not immune from stresses. They're not immune from infidelity, life situations, kids with special needs, divorces, a boss that won't get off their neck, you know, or get off their back, or, you know, the commuting time, you name it, they have it, and they don't have the ability to departmentalize, and because we're not robots. And so you have a situation like this, and I'm sure he was off duty, right? And he participates in this. And there's something to be said for having these, what I say, mental and emotional checkpoints, like you do DWI, checkpoints, evaluations, not only before you get on the force, but during your time while you're on the force, just like you do with the gun range, right? And this is the story, right? So one was 30 and one was 26, and this is what happened. So there's something to be said for having that check-in, seeing what's going on, having an understanding of the stresses of life, and kind of trying to put that in a place as you go through what you're going through.
Yeah, I believe this is the same story, actually. You know, this is, this officer was an officer. He was stationed in a PSA 8 in the Bronx. And apparently the wife knew that he may have been following her. So she parks the car, meets up with the employee / lover, because she has this dog walking business, and doesn't realize that the husband is still following and chases. And they then meet back up, get into separate cars to go meet at the motel or hotel nearby, La Quinta, I believe, and he goes in hot pursuit after this guy and ends up gunning him down. And you're right, there's definitely some mental health issue there because, at the end of the day, no level of jealousy that leads you to kill someone else is there has to be some mental illness there. There has to be something that just checked out, especially for someone in law enforcement whose job is to save lives. I mean,
and you have a gun. You have
a gun.
You
level of responsibility that you're entrusted in walking around with that weapon. It's and unfortunately, I would say this. Unfortunately, what ends up happening is I would imagine that what some cops will say is that they can't afford to ever have their mental illness put into question because it will then lead to them being disqualified from working their job in terms of fitness for duty.
And I guess that's where
unfortunately, my response to that would be is that there are employee assistance programs which are out there which would allow these officers to seek mental health counseling therapy confidentially. And, it's something that they should be looking to take advantage of and advise through the ranks because, I'm sure no officer wants to see a fellow officer go through something like this and commit this sort of tragedy. This officer ended up committing suicide right after the incident. After he shoots this man, he says to himself, apparently, his life is over and shoots himself. And, the wife is left to mourn two individuals. Oh.
Yeah. Well, she drove up and saw them both in the pool of blood. I mean, this whole story is just
and I would take your thought one step further, Ed, in stating that we always talk about first there's conversation turns into a little bit more, then that turns into a little bit more, it'll be rejected, and then it turns into action. And so we know that the higher ups have, just like we now recognize, there was a time like you didn't even recognize mental health, now you recognize mental health. And so that same type of chipping away has to happen with the New York City Police Department. And unfortunately and fortunately, it takes the commissioner, it takes the mayor to start putting this verbiage out there. It takes the police benevolent president, I think it's Patrick Lynch, to quail down some of the other rhetoric and start to put that in, because they're talking about this behind closed doors. It's not on front page. They're talking about this behind closed doors, to a degree. They just haven't accepted it as a way, or else you wouldn't have, crisis intervention training, CIT training. You wouldn't have those things, right? So if you can provide that for civilians to say, look, here's a course, this is a program, this is what you need to do in order to better deal with civilians that may have emotional and mental stresses and challenges, and you have to engage with them, that there's conversations about that on our own. Where the wall has to really be torn down is that, yes, I go through this. Yes, I'm fit for duty. Then I go for a promotion, and then you want to bring it up. Then you want to use it for my downfall. Really, it's not part of my downfall, but if it comes between you and me, Ed, and you so-and-so's boy, we can't use that. We'll use the mental health. And that's where politics and politics come into play in progressing and promotions within. But that wall has to be torn down.
Mm-hmm. It's really unfortunate because there are so many other stories as we look back at what has hit the news cycle when it comes to why those of us who have friends, family on the force are also concerned. Those who are showing up every day to do the right thing and to serve and protect. And then they end up in situations like even this one with the off-duty officer that was shot in Manhattanville. I think he survived though.
Right. So just before I talk about that, I just want to make sure that we understand that you have an officer that has gone through this, which is the love affair, love triangle, or sees that, how that kind of really comes into our life is that that same individual is now interacting with you in a stressful moment, and it may be domestic violence related, and they can't help but to be jaded because of what is happening in their personal life, which might mean a different outcome for you or a loved one. And so that's how it all kind of, what we call a domino effect, how it all intermingles. Here, when we talk about the off-duty officer shot in the foot in Manhattanville, for those who don't know, Manhattanville is what they call the project, New York City housing in New York, in Manhattan. And my understanding of this story is that the off-duty officer was attending a vigil for someone who died, and the vigil, you put the candles or what have you, and then there was gunplay at that location. The reason why I wanted to talk about this story today, as we talk about police and mental health, is that one of the things I advocate for is mental health, having that part of what we call reform or the revolution when it comes down to policing, making that part of it, the evaluations like you do with going to the target practice or going to the range for certification. This right here, in this particular case, I advocate all the time for, hey, police being there being a residence requirement, police living in the area, living among the community, so you have a better handle of who's in the community, you have a better understanding of who's doing what, right? This is exactly what this brother was doing, or this police officer was doing. He's in the community, he's attending a vigil. I didn't hear of any assignment that he was there undercover, because he said he was off duty. So he's part of the community. And we have to protect those police officers as part of the community and protect. And I know, Dr. Grant, there's other stories that we want to talk to in regards to this, but he wasn't protected. And we're seeing stories like this of off-duty police officers being victimized because they don't have anything on their forehead that says off-duty police officer, like this officer in Queens who was stopped at a traffic light and somebody knocked on his window and they try to, what I'm going to say, carjack, and he was shot and he had to shoot others. And there was another one where another police officer was going to work and this individual decided that they're going to tap his car, bump into his car, do it several times, have words with the police officer, spit at the police officer, and then shoot at the police officer. In all these cases, nowhere could you have told, you could have told that these people were police officers. They didn't have it written on their forehead. So as much as we ask for residency requirements and to be here and to be in the community, those are the dangers that we see. Ed?
Yeah, no, I don't have anything to add other than to say, what I stand by what I said earlier, definitely access to mental health, and we should provide more support for our officers, no doubt.
Absolutely. And this is Mental Health Awareness Month.
Ding,
When you
ding,
talk
ding,
about,
good for something.
yeah, it is. And it's important, not just on the force, but, just overall to make sure that we are creating pathways for individuals to get help. And this is where the legal meets the cultural, and culturally, we need to be aware of the fact that there's stigmas that can be attached to going for counseling and getting help, and there shouldn't be. It's about how to cope, how to maintain, how to make sure that whatever you're doing in your life, you're showing up as your best self. So police officers need that same sort of support, as well as do so many who are in community. So we want to thank.
And Dr. Grant, to that point, right? I would be remiss if I sat here and put this out there and say, hey, look, I'm a member. Like, I got my guy. I give a shout out to my man, Dr. Gray. He's not taking any more clients, so I just let y'all know that now. Yeah, but I give a shout out. When you do this type of work, when you're in life in general, you're talking about being a father, you're talking about being a husband, you're talking about being a defense attorney, being a civil rights activist, dealing with wrongful death and police brutality. You're talking about just trying to provide something to your community, some type of vision, right? Because people come to you, right? And hey, Royce, I got this issue. What do you think about this? Being an elder within the community, that's a lot of giving. Right? That's a lot of giving. I'm giving a lot. And sometimes you need somebody to talk to outside of your best friend, because I have a lot of good friends. I saw Dow Darthard on here. We have our little conversations once in a blue moon. I see Anthony, he came on here. You know, I got a good friend, Teddy Singleton over there. Outside of that, you need that person that has the degree, the PhD, and I don't mean poor, hungry, and destitute. I mean PhD, you know what I mean? Have that degree and can sit down and evaluate from a 30,000 foot aerial view to let you know, hey man, you know what? You kind of fall for this a little bit. You have to do a little bit of this different. You know, you have to service your community this way and not more of the other way. So you can have some balance.
And that's important for us to always underscore. And I am looking for some of the other Black health professionals, African American psychiatrists that are available as well, and psychologists, so that, you know, so where the legal meets the cultural, culturally, there are professionals that you are able to get additional support from. But you were about to say something, Senor Pichardo?
Yeah. I mean, while you look for that, I think I would be remiss not to recognize on the show the death of Jewell Caples at the age of 53. She was considered the first lady of Death Row. She was the singing voice on a lot of those records back when Death Row was in its heyday. So just wanted to say rest in power, sister. That was recently announced. You know, her passing.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Just wanted to give that shout out.
Absolutely. A female voice that was a part of the explosion. So I just wanted to make sure, and I will place this information in the chat as well, just in general. So this is for any individual or professional. If you want to connect with the Association of Black Psychologists, this will give you an opportunity to look across the country, wherever you are. We have a lot of viewers for the obvious reasons here in the New York City area, but across the country, you're able to look up and find those who will understand your perspective and your paradigm because they're living it. And as people of color, what we deal with and the various traumas that happen to us professionally, personally, generationally, and be able to talk and just connect. Because of COVID, you know, so much of what is done now is virtual. So you don't always have to travel to an office, but you can still find time to connect and have a professional support you through whatever stage you're going through in life. So I just wanted to make sure we shared that as we lifted up all of this heavy content that we are talking about, and the need for the information that even our officers need to have to function properly each day. And hey, Sonia, thank you for tuning in, and everyone who has been a part of listening in on the show today. Check on your strong friends. That was something that was trending in the height of this pandemic, because everyone was dealing with this new reality that we found ourselves in different ways. So it's not a opportunity to cause judgment or say, no, you should be stronger or you should this, and deal with loss and tragedy, because so many of us lost loved ones during this time. There's no statute of limitations on grief. So all these things we need to deal with culturally so that we can be responsible contributors to the communities that we live in. So final thoughts, gentlemen, before we close out yet another show and episode of Speaking Legally, where the legal meets the cultural. Start with you, Senor Pichardo.
Don't be afraid to ask for help, folks. That's one of the important lessons I've learned in life.
Good one.
One of the things I would say, and I know it may sound comical, but it really isn't. You know, check on your neighborhood lawyer. Check on that person, right? And no, it may sound comical, but it's for real, right? Because what happens in our practice? What happens? The problem comes, right? Because we're problem solvers. But there's always something behind door number one, because there's a problem behind the problem, right? And then there's people that trying to help you through the problem that may have their problems, and they may see it differently, right? And so then you're dealing with, especially if somebody's incarcerated, you're dealing with the people that are out, right? And they got their issues, and you're dealing with the person that's in. But let's just say we're in a world where everyone's out and it's not criminal. You're going through closing of a house. You're going through a loved one that now is it has to go to a nursing home, and you have to do a will, and you have to. All that is emotions, right? And if those people that you're servicing are not seeking the mental health that we're talking about, that comes to our doorstep. I'm not crying. It's not sour grapes. It's just the reality. Here's the cultural reality. It comes right to our doorstep. Period. Point blank. I got to dot the I and cross the T. I'm the one that got to tell you, hey, look, don't do this, do that. I thought we had this conversation. Oh, but Ray's doing this and he's doing. Then I got to go do that argument over there and stop Ray from doing what they're doing because it's not part of the plan that we set out. Right? I mean, this is the reality, right? This is what we deal with. So every now and then, I like a client, and my clients do this, I must say, and I'm sure there's people out there that are attorneys that have this experience. Sometimes clients just calling you, just, hey man, what's going on? I just wanted to know, and it's cool that they slide in. I want to know what's going on with my case, but that's at the end. But they give me the warm and fuzzies in the beginning. I'm good with that. Right? Because
Absolutely.
who's to say I'm around? Who's to say I'm around? And anybody who know me, there's a thin line between like he's around today and did something tomorrow. It's one of those things. So
But no, that's a good point. It's a good point. And Sonia seems to agree. Yeah, check on me. And that's why I said before, check on your strong friends. Everyone who's in professional capacities that you're pouring out energy, time, resources, skills, you're pouring out. So if you're pouring out, you also have to make sure you have opportunities to refill and that folks check on you, that you might need to take a minute just to regroup so you can come back stronger and clearer and more passionate about the work that you do. So check on your neighborhood attorney.
One of those ways you could just show up on this show and just place a comment.
And check on 2 of your neighborhood attorneys where the legal meets the cultural. Absolutely. Well, thank you all for tuning in. We appreciate your participation. Share the episode out. You never know who might need to hear information that we're sharing, resources that could help, or just need to listen to some discourse on what's happening and how it affects our community. This is where the legal meets the cultural. We'll be back next week, same time, same place. Stay safe, be well. There's a new variant out there, so don't get too comfortable moving about. Just be careful and cautious and use wisdom. Bye-bye, everyone.